Welcome to the Ecosystem podcast. I'm Sash Mukherjee, Principal Analyst at Ecosystem, and today I'm talking to our Principal Advisor, Kaushik Ghatak, again. Welcome back, Kaushik.
Thank you, Sash. It's good to be back.
For those of you who missed the earlier session, Kaushik spoke at length on the role of value selling and why he thinks it's not just a cliche. Now, Kaushik, in our last podcast, we talked about articulating the business case for technology investments first, the value drivers, the whys, before getting into the specific functions and features of the products and services, the hows. Today, can we dig deeper into the topic of business cases? Like, how does a good business case look like, in your opinion?
Sure. Absolutely. A good business case is the starting point for any digital technology investment decisions. As you mentioned rightly, at a big picture level, a good business case should be a high impact articulation of the whys. It should make people sit up that, yes, these are strong reasons for us to go into this direction. And that initial impact and motivation is extremely important to sustain the entire digital technology planning and execution. So let me get into what would be the elements of a good business case. First of all, it should seamlessly connect three essential elements. Firstly, the strategic objectives of a company, in terms of aspirations in markets, customer segments, product portfolio, and organization structure. Also, in terms of the specific financial targets, in terms of, in 2 years' time, what kind of return on equity or return on assets that a company may have. Once you have articulated the strategy, the second part of it is the business process capabilities that would be necessary to achieve the strategic objectives. Capabilities that a company would need to improve its operating performance in sales, marketing, supply chain, manufacturing, etc., etc. And then link up technology. The technology capabilities that would be required to achieve the operating performance goals in terms of, let's say, better visibility, near real-time response capabilities, better analytics, better insights, etc., etc. And the points 2 and 3, the ones that I mentioned earlier, are in today's parlance, we loosely term them as use cases. So articulating the strategic objectives and the ensuing use cases are extremely important. Connecting the above three dots, however, is not enough. Any investment decision is competing with other alternative investment possibilities. The senior management of any company or the board is always evaluating investment decisions in terms of the returns they will bring. First, in terms of the quantitative impact on the top line or bottom line, and secondly, in terms of the intangibles, very powerful strategic reasons. And these may be to penetrate into new markets, they need to make investments, or to survive in the long run and have a sustainable business, both from an environment perspective and from a financial perspective, they need to make this. These are reasons hard to quantify, but you feel in the gut. Any good business case should cover the above areas adequately and in the context of the company's business environment.
Right. That's been a very useful big picture view, Kaushik. Thank you. Now, as an analyst, whenever I've been asked to evaluate a technology deployment, I've always asked how the organization thinks it has benefited from it. And often I've heard things like, it's hard to quantify, but we know that it's been useful. It's a little vague. So could you tell us how one can actually quantify these returns?
Yeah, sure. And this is what I call show me the money, right? Unless you can do a good job in terms of showing the actual returns that will come, uh, it will not turn out to be a good business case. And that's because, you see, a technology investment proposal is competing with other possible investments, right? Let's say I, instead of investing in a CRM or a supply chain platform, I could be hiring more salespeople, or I could be setting up new channels for distribution, Or I could be thinking of running new promotions or campaigns, etc., for some of my new products in my product portfolio. And at the board level, the only way to evaluate and differentiate between these competing investments is the common currency of the dollar value of the business benefits that will
Mhm.
come from these investments, right? And therefore, the returns from digital technology investments has to have a quantified dollar value element to it. But how does one go about that process, right? So, Sash, to your point, it's difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
Is there a process? Is there an approach that we could use? So the one that I have been using again as part of my formal hat of value seller in terms of
Yeah.
developing business cases and helping our clients develop their own business cases is first of all to establish how the technology capabilities that we have articulated right in the beginning, how will they improve operating performance? Let's say in terms of increased sales, reduced customer churn, lower inventory costs, higher operational equipment effectiveness, that what we call OEE, etc., etc. So we are talking about quantifiable improvements in operating performance. And in that, companies need to put a directional aspiration, a goal post, if you will, that will be reached after the use cases have been implemented and adapted. Now, how does one go about doing that? One can take the help of several industry-wide benchmarks available to estimate these values. For example, on an average, what has been the improvement in, let's say, forecast accuracies of FMCG companies across the world, or across a specific consumer product sector that this company is in, after they have implemented advanced supply chain planning systems? We all know that improvement in forecast accuracies will have the dual benefit of reducing inventory holding costs as well as increasing customer service levels. Because if you can forecast better, you don't need to keep so much of buffer inventory in your system to meet the same service level. And in many cases, since you are estimating the demand better, your service levels will improve. Now, both of these, the inventory holding cost and improvement in customer service level, are very quantifiable operating performance parameters. That is your starting point. So you need to take that benchmark improvement percent and apply in your context.
Right. Kaushik, as in the last podcast, we would really like if you could bring in some real world examples to, kind of elaborate on this.
Sure. So let's say if you're a Southeast Asia based FMCG company and you are evaluating an advanced supply chain planning system implementation, how much of that benchmark improvement percentage can you realistically expect given your business environment? And I have got into long discussions with CFOs on this subject. Uh, because when it comes to ratifying and validating these business cases, CFOs take a front position, right? And the common question and resistance always has been, hey, but these are global industry-wide benchmarks. They don't
Right.
apply to us. And I always tell them that the important thing to remember is that the absolute improvement figure is secondary. It's not that important. The directional improvement aspiration is. So first of all, you have to admit that, or you have to accept that supply chain planning systems implementation will indeed improve forecast accuracies. Because if that premise is wrong, then you can't go further on that. So then if the global benchmark of forecast accuracy improvement is, let's say, 10%, you may want to consider just a 5% improvement for your business, given your environment, and calculate the business benefits in terms of the inventory holding cost reduction and service level based on that 5% improvement. By following the above process for all the business process areas that the proposed use cases will impact, it will help you to draw up a complete list of business benefits in dollar terms. We are talking about business case, so we are essentially talking about returns, and therefore we need to bring in the cost piece, right? But that next part is easier. You will need to estimate the costs of the technology investments, the one-time implementation costs and then ongoing. Today in the cloud world, the one-time investment cost is usually less. The ongoing costs are usually, they are more sustained over a long run. So anyway, whatever your deployment model is, you need to estimate those costs, including your training costs, including any resource costs that you are deploying for implementing this. And all of these need to be in dollar terms again, obviously. And then you run a standard discounted cash flow capital budgeting model to get your, the parameters that CFOs love, the NPVs, the IRRs, the
Yeah.
ROIs, and payback periods. The boards will relate to this. And also, this will give them a fair sense of the contribution that such technology investments will make towards their strategic goals in terms of financial parameters such as ROE, ROA, return on assets, ROI, etc., etc. And while in this process, one framework that I have found very useful is to think through the ROIC tree framework that was initiated by DuPont quite some time back,
Yeah.
where you could relate the financial aspiration in terms of financial parameters to the operating parameters that will provide those financial uh, parameters in terms of the operational parameters that will enable those financial aspirations, and those operational performances in specific areas such as sales, procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, warehousing, etc., etc.
Right. That was a very, very insightful take, Kaushik. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about the other factors that you mentioned right at the beginning that impact the decision making, the intangibles, right? The strategic considerations, the gut feels that seep into the business case. Is it necessary to consider them at all? I mean, would these not make the decision making subjective to an extent?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And fortunately or unfortunately, maybe unfortunately when it comes to business cases, a lot of us who get involved in this are very left-brained.
Okay.
So we love the quantifiable, the quantification of that whole case, right? But it's critical to understand that a company does not make decisions. There is no entity such as a company which is taking a decision, right? Key people within the companies do. And for people, intangibles do matter because the gut feel is extremely important. If the gut feel is not good in terms of some of those, strategic benefits that, you know, would should be a should be the drivers for such technology investments, then it will not make the cut from the people's mind, and that is why it is critical to list the intangibles. So what could be these intangibles? This could be the relevant strategic benefits of new technology investments. Uh, it's basically what kind of technology investments we are making. Is it a complete revamp of the landscape, or is it maybe a new CRM implementation? So based on that, one needs to think through in what areas would these strategic benefits ensue. And this could be in terms of, again, depending on the area, it could be increased brand reputation. It could be in a supply chain context, let's say, it could be better collaboration and trust with trading partners, such as distributors and suppliers, because now you have better information flow and low latency information flow with them. It could be social and sustainability aspirations.
Mhm.
It could be better employee engagement. It could be just that I need to get into this new market, so that new market potential. These are all such candidates that can and should be a part of a good business case.
Wonderful. Kaushik, always a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sash. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you all for listening in. Log on to the Ecosystem platform for more insights from Kaushik and our data driven research. Till next time.